and welcome, friends, to Usanas Dialogues. Today we are back here again, almost after about a month. And I must say that no sooner had we expected the Gaza war to end, or at least begin the ceasefire negotiations or come to something concrete. War erupted from another quarters, the quarters which are most unexpected ones. The quarters well known for their Buddhist viharas and their beautiful resorts and beaches, Thailand and Cambodia. And today, we are living in a very tumultuous world. We see war everywhere. Already, the Ukraine war is going on. Gaza war is not coming to an end. Now, this another war theater, and that too in South Asia, right after a major tussle between India and Pakistan, in which India launched Operation Sindoor, it really raises many alarm bells. I must say, many analysts have started talking about the upcoming Third World War. Until recently, we thought of it as some kind of more of a conspiracy theory or some sort of a gibberish. But now it seems that with the different war theaters emerging around the world, that there is some substance to this. And today we have an amazing expert to deconstruct, to explore, and to enlighten us on the nuances, dynamics, causes, motives, and the future trajectory of the Thailand-Cambodia war. So I would like to welcome Dr. Mark S. Cogan. I'll just initially introduce Dr. Mark S. Cogan is an associate professor of peace and conflict studies at Kansai Gaidai University, based in Osaka Prefecture, Japan. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Kansai Gaidai.
That's correct. Kansai Gaidai. That's correct.
Thank you. He specializes in peace building, human rights, democratization, and social movements, particularly in Thailand and Cambodia. Mark's research focuses on Southeast Asia, particularly on authoritarian regimes in Thailand and Cambodia, with an emphasis on foreign policy, bilateral and multilateral relations, and joint security cooperation. He's also an associated senior research fellow at ISDP Sweden. So welcome, Dr. Mark. And I must say that this is really interesting because so far we have been doing a lot of events and seminars on West Asia, terrorism, counterterrorism, and we get to see lots of experts from the Western world specializing on this. But it was really difficult to find someone who understands this region, that's Thailand and Cambodia well. So we're really lucky. We are honored to have you with us today. So initially, I'll request you to start with your opening remarks for about 10 minutes, and then we can follow up with the question and answer sessions.
Sure.
And I must tell you that this session is being recorded. And normally, we are a think tank based in Rajasthan, and we mostly work on geopolitics and international security. So we do a lot of online events. We record our events and interviews, and after that, we post it on our YouTube channel, which has a very wide coverage. And we circulate and we share it with many think tanks, Indian Strategic Community, National Security Advisory Council, and diplomats, and also the student community. So that's all we do.
Sure.
So please, over to you, Dr. Mark.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the invitation. And as I said before, I thank Dr. Nagy, who recommended me to you. It's nice to be with some very interesting people who are interested in not only what's going on in South Asia, West Asia, but Southeast Asia as well. What I wanted to do was talk about not just the current context, which is pretty transparent, actually, but the building blocks of nationalism, which is the key driver of the conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. And I thought I would present a kind of useful framework for analysis. And this goes back to something that I teach my students when it comes to nationalism. And this goes back to a psychologist by the name of Vamik Volkan. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote a paper years ago, I think 2000, 2001, and it was called Transgenerational Transmissions and Chosen Traumas. And it's how large group identity is formed. And the interesting thing is the formation of something called a chosen trauma. which is a huge part of large group identity. And this explains a lot when it comes to Cambodia, because this is what they call, or he calls, a mental representation of a kind of massive intergenerational trauma that not only the current people have gone through, which is a sort of current border dispute, but the ancestors, the previous generations. And for Cambodia, this goes all the way back to the Khmer Empire, which fell apart around the 12th century. So this is the suffering of those in the past who died, suffered, or whatever at the hands of an enemy. So in a nutshell, when something happens like this, large group identity. Sorry? Okay, so large group identity is threatened. And what people tend to do when identity is threatened, when a nation is on the line, when there's a border dispute, when there are casualties. Remember, there are several Cambodian soldiers that were killed early on in this conflict. The chosen trauma, according to Volkan, is reactivated to strengthen, to support that threatened identity. So if you look at it, it's like it's a way of defending one's national consciousness. It's mental representation of who they are and what they are. And if you look at Cambodian history, there have been always enemies at the gate. So we're not just talking about, the old ancient Thai kingdoms, the Yutian kingdom or the Siamese, but we're talking about the British and the French. The British were occupiers of what is now Myanmar and Malaysia, and the French, which was basically French Indochina, they were occupiers, or they colonized Vietnam and Cambodia. And Cambodia suffered greatly at the hands of each one of these, powerful, much more powerful adversaries. And if you think about Cambodia as a kind of nation state, a state with geographic and political sort of integrity, defined boundaries, Cambodia's territory has been shrinking for many, many years. For example, there is a group of people called the Khmer Krom, who for many years occupied the Mekong River Delta. And the Khmer Krom are essentially now, because of change or change boundaries, living in what is now Ho Chi Minh City, or that area. They're basically sort of walled off from what was originally their homeland. And of course, in the mid 1970s, when the Khmer Rouge fell, it was basically occupied by the Vietnamese. So throughout its history, there have always been enemies. There's always been threats. And each time during this kind of tumultuous history, nationalism, bringing up old conflicts, bringing up old threats, is a way of rallying to a certain extent around the flag, rallying your compatriots, so to speak, in defense of the Khmer nation. So the interesting thing is that this chosen trauma is a tool that nations use, and it's not just Cambodia that uses it. Thailand uses the same thing. You know, when they had the Preah Vihear Temple dispute in 2007, 2008, Thai nationalists were on the street. There were large demonstrations calling to a certain extent for violence by certain people at the border. Uh, Thailand uses the same thing as a sort of as a defense of what is territorial Thailand. But why now? What's the underlying driver of the nationalism to a certain extent that has been driven by former prime minister, which was really the ruling leader, Hun Sen? And I think what's really happening is that there is a kind of flurry of um, recent actions that are prompting this push towards nationalism. So I'm not talking about kind of a certain military posture or pushing tensions to a kind of boil to get international attention. But it's a congruence of factors. For example, there was an earlier crackdown on scam centers in Cambodia, and the Chinese cracked down on scam centers. There has been a history for many, many years of timber smuggling by certain darker elements. And Thailand, for recently, had been considering the legalization of casinos. This was catastrophic for Cambodian political elites who would lose quite considerably by a casino that is not Chinese owned or elite owned, but would be owned by a kind of hotel restaurant corporation similar to that would be in Hong Kong or Macau or even Singapore. So the other thing, of course, is that there are oil, gas, and energy considerations that come into play, which is evidenced by the earlier dispute last year, early this year, over the island of Cogan, which is a small chain island, basically, that is rich in oil and gas. So what I'm saying is that um, this escalation of violence, I think, is really not about the border itself, but this is a way of reaffirming a kind of domestic purpose, a kind of domestic political purpose. Now, this is about the leadership, not necessarily of Hun Mane, his son, but reaffirming Hun Sen's orchestration as party leader, and um, his role is sort of to a certain extent a kind of uncle, as the former prime minister of Thailand called him.
Dr. Mark, are you there? We've lost you.
I think there is some signal problem.
Is it from our side or from his side?
This is from his side.
Okay. So please write to him.
Yeah, everything is clear from our side.
Yeah.
Just a minute.
Have you written to him? Have you texted him?
Yes.
Do you have his phone number or email, whatever? Just
No, I have his email.
okay.
He's joining again. He just sent me a message. Yes, he
I'm
has
sorry,
joined.
I got disconnected. Are you there?
Yes, we are there. No worries. You can
No worries.
proceed.
But I heard you. I tried to respond, and no one responded, so I assumed I was disconnected. I apologize.
No,
No
no
worries.
worries, Dr. Maske.
Okay.
You can start from the last point where you
Yeah. So
got disconnected.
what I was saying was that really the conflict itself, the uh, driver of the conflict, from the Cambodian perspective, is not really tensions with Thailand, but the advantage that um, is currently presenting itself because, to a certain extent, of the weakness in Thailand's ruling government. So, as you know, if you're familiar with Thai politics, you know the Pure Thai Party's coalition has been particularly weak, and the prime minister is now temporary or acting prime minister, so to speak. And the previous one, Britantorn Shinawat, the daughter of Thaksin Shinawat, was caught in a phone call with Hun Sen a few months ago, and essentially using very affectionate terms. And I use the word uncle, which is kind of like a father figure, not just like uncle, like the literal meaning of the word uncle, but father term. But their familial ties are quite well known. The Shinawats and the Hun Sen family are quite well connected. They have been for many years. The uh, former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawat, who was the sister of Thaksin, uh, when she fled the country, she actually was discovered later on that she had a Cambodian passport, and Thaksin has spent a great deal of time in Cambodia. So when the families meet with each other, there's a sort of there used to be, I suppose, a kind of warm feeling, and the general consensus of late was that ties between Cambodia and Thailand were fairly good. But I think, to a certain extent, that I think the familial ties were not as strong, and that the Hun Sen family used this weakness that is going on in Thailand, the phone call that was leaked by Hun Sen himself, as an opportunity to leverage the situation against its neighbor, which is obviously Thailand. And that means relitigating border disputes, relitigating boundaries, litigating temple disputes, which have been the subject of debates and scrutiny and a lot of controversy for many years. As you know, the whole conflict started because of a protest in Cambodia over one of the temples. So I think that Hun Sen is essentially fueling the political chaos, driving the narrative of loss, of chosen trauma, so to speak. And you see that in social media. You see that in public comments and in newspapers or Cambodian papers, where it's not Hun Manet who is driving the kind of a nationalist narrative, but it's Hun Sen himself, and highlighting high aggression, the military directives that the Cambodian government is using, the excessive use of force by alleged use of force by the Thai military, and highlighting how fragile, to a certain extent, or sort of not placating, but exacerbating what is a very fractured state in Thai domestic politics. As you say, or a lot of people say, you never let a crisis go to waste. And it doesn't necessarily have to be your crisis. It can be someone else's domestic political crisis that can bring up an opportunity to shift things in your favor. So I think that this is a way of Cambodia to do that, and to a certain extent, reassert domestic legitimacy, public legitimacy, a kind of solidarity, not necessarily with Cambodia, perhaps the main political party itself, because all the rest of the political parties, of course, are dissolved or are extremely weak. But this is essentially very good news for Hun Sen, because it's a way of reframing the narrative. Now, there's some good things and there's some bad things. You know, for example, the UNESCO dispute was largely ruled in Cambodia's favor. But the territorial disputes, particularly the interpretation of, early 20th century treaty, which is basically the 1907 treaty, that demarcated certain areas, is relatively controversial. So these domestic drivers amplifying an aggressive military posture is Hun Sen's way of relitigating essentially over 100 years old demarcation issues. And that's the driver. So if you think of this as a current conflict, as a kind of war between Cambodia and Thailand, I think that is a little one-sided, or perhaps a bit short-term in perspective. This is something that has occurred and will reoccur from time to time. And I'm not talking about on a 2 or 3 year cycle, but it could occur every 20 years or every decade. And these demarcation issues are very hot button issues, and they tend to stir up nationalism. And the prospect of resolving them through international means, through international courts or international mechanisms, will be long and complicated, and to a certain extent quite messy. So the risk for Hun Sen is pushing it too far, because I think the interpretation of the 1907 treaty, which would settle most of this, is quite controversial. And it's a matter of essentially a reinterpretation of that treaty. So that will not likely be resolvable in the near future or anytime soon. If they haven't done it since 1907, why do you think they do it now? I mean, this is a very old thing, and it's a matter of words or a matter of interpretation. So whether diplomatic standing, for example, Cambodia moved Thailand's diplomatic status or its standing with Cambodia to its lowest level. That is simply political posturing. It's a political tactic. But I would imagine that this conflict is probably going to be short-lived. Obviously, the sad part about the whole thing is that nationalism, this trauma-based nationalism, I would call it, on the Cambodian side, is resulting in the loss of innocent life, of innocent civilians on the Thai side, and of course, innocent lives on the Cambodia side. But in terms of resolution, I don't think that both sides are interested in it. I think they're interested in a kind of temporary agreement. But in terms of a long-term resolution of the conflict, I think it's better left for political consumption. It's better left unresolved because it's something that can be used, reintroduced at a later date, at a later time, when either side has a particular advantage. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I see it.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah.
Mark. I think you brought out those facts and those aspects of this conflict, which have not been discussed about. But definitely, I really appreciate this, and this is the beauty of long-term research and also adding a long academic experience to it. So you mentioned about this collective trauma and nationalism and the
Yeah.
domestic political causes. So
Yeah.
before I move on to my other questions pertaining to the more immediate issues and causes, I would request you to elaborate a little more on the domestic political aspect. I mean, who is basically, if it comes to Thailand, who are the main actors who are trying to seek legitimacy, or what are the primary motivations? And also on the Cambodian side, if you can specify a little bit more.
Sure. So let's just talk about that. It's a very good question. So I talked more about Cambodia than I did Thailand, but Thailand, the political actors. When I talk about political actors, really talking about elites, political elites. This is not a conflict that is fought by soldiers. This is not a conflict that is being directed by civilians, although the heat of nationalism, the national anxieties along the border are quite hot. But this is a Thai government that is really, the political actors are chaotic. So you have a Pheu Thai party, which in 2023, there was an election in May 2023, where the Pheu Thai party projected itself to win around 400 seats, would have gave it a clear majority, but came second to the Move Forward Party, which is an upstart progressive political party. And they had, because of that second place finish, formed a kind of coalition together. But because of other actors, the monarchy and the military-backed parties, they would not let the prime ministerial candidate from the Move Forward Party, PITA, serve as prime minister. And in a sort of slew of judicial interference and political sort of interference caused by a elite-driven military and monarchy drafted 2017 constitution, it allowed appointed senators to block the selection of Pita as Thailand's prime minister. So what happened was, because that coalition dissolved, Pheu Thai, who still wanted to govern, wanted to place in the majority, had to choose a fragile sort of deal with the devil, which is working with military parties, military-backed parties, and royalist parties, who had been the enemy of Thaksin Shinawatra for 25 years or so, 23 years or so. So this is a fragile coalition of those parties, and of course, a kind of centrist or right of center party called Bum Chai Thai. And Bum Chai Thai was a sort of the glue that, to a certain extent, held the coalition together. And when the party left the coalition because of this exposed, leaked television phone call that the prime minister insulted, to a certain extent, the military. She accused the military of, or insulted the military, or the Second Thai Army, I believe, in the phone call. Kind of blamed the army for the situation. They left the coalition because they felt it was kind of like insulting to Thailand's honor for her to be talking like that to a head of state, or a world leader like Hun Sen. And it exposed the familial ties, the personalist ties between the Hun Sen family and the Shinawats, which is another weakness for the ruling government. The big other actor, of course, is the military. And the military, of course, as you know, has a history of intervening in Thai politics, and has done so consistently, basically since the end of the Second World War. There was a military dictator during World War II, was a military dictator after. I mean, so many different prime ministers that were either unelected or had been installed because of various coups d'etats throughout Thai history. The military is a very, very important actor and a very critical actor. And it's never a very good idea to underestimate how much sway, how much influence the military has over Thai politics. They are not, to a certain extent, seen as the primary actor in this conflict, because to a certain extent, they're being overshadowed by a kind of political melodrama between this weak political coalition and this sort of family dynastic ties with the Hun Sen family. But the Thai military and the Thai monarchy are very, very powerful, and they have for a very, very long time worked behind the scenes to a certain extent to get their way, to bend the country to their will. And this is not necessarily something that I can talk about briefly. This is something that there's volumes of literature on, if people from the foundation want more material on. But these are the primary actors in on the Thailand side.
So can we say that in the recent conflict, is it the leaked phone call which kind of embarrassed the prime minister, and in fact they wanted to boost the lost credibility, and for that reason they sort of kick-started the war? Or is it the military and the monarchy which are behind the immediate escalation?
No, I think it's it's not one or the other. It's kind of like it presented an opportunity.
Okay.
This is a look. Before the phone call, okay, there were already tensions with Cambodia, and I talked about Cogan, right?
Yeah.
And there were already tensions prior to that, because Thailand had been exploring the idea of creating this casino bill, or these integrated resort complexes, which have casinos in them, which would be competition for elite-owned Cambodian, members of society, and of course, Chinese-owned companies. There are rising energy costs in Thailand and Cambodia, and the wealth that is certainly below the ground there is really, really important. So there's a lot of controversy over this, and there's a lot of controversy that was generated months earlier. So there was a 2001 memorandum. It was called MOU 44, and that was something that Thailand and Cambodia signed to explore energy resources in these kinds of disputed waters. But this is where all of these sorts of political actors come together, because the conservative elements of Thai society, the military, right? They were saying that, look, if you jointly explore, which is basically a 27,000 something square foot maritime zone that is claimed jointly by both parties, you would essentially be ceding some aspects of Thailand's sovereignty, right? So in the past, Cambodia has consistently tried to resolve territorial disputes by submitting them to international bodies. That's where he gets a kind of legitimacy. He gets a kind of backing, this is the true with the UNESCO dispute. So by allowing this interpretation, this MOU 44 to exist, essentially, if you interpret it as Thaksin Shinawatra designed it, by default, Thailand would cede part of its national sovereignty, certain territory, even national wealth, to Cambodia. So this is there are a number of issues at play, and they have almost very little to do with the actual border dispute that's going on right now in the north. There are a number of domestic issues as well, and I talked about those, that are influencing how Hun Sen is reacting currently and how the Cambodian government is positioning themselves in the middle of this crisis. I mean, Thailand's crisis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And regarding Hun Sen, we saw that he is trying to really project and build his son as a possible successor, and he is in a more of an advisory. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, please correct me if my understanding is wrong, because I'm not an expert on this region. But so
Sure.
I have a curiosity, like, can we say that the Hun Sen family in Cambodia is also facing some kind of a political crisis, and in order to just boost their credibility or the image, that this war really helps them in the immediate context?
I wouldn't put it that way. If you go back to 1995 or earlier, this was the Paris agreements that created this UNTAC, the UN Transitional Authority in Cambodia, which gave way to the 1993 elections. Hun Sen, as a former member of the Khmer Rouge, had a critical role to play in bringing people to the table, and to a certain extent by default, because he had been really in power or in Cambodia and basically a very seasoned, crafty political figure in Cambodia. He had the infrastructure, the political infrastructure needed to win elections and to defeat political opponents whenever free and fair, quote unquote, elections were to transpire. But he did not choose democracy, did not choose that path, and he essentially deposed the kind of co-prime minister that was with him in 1997 in a coup. And by the next cycle, he was the sole prime minister. And the CPP, or the Cambodian People's Party, have had a kind of monopoly on political power, and the Hun Sen family has had a kind of not a political dynasty, but they've had control. They're a kind of iron grip on Cambodia for many years. The only real threat to Cambodia or to Hun Sen was in political opposition, and that was the former the Human Rights Party, the Sam Rainsy Party, which became the Cambodia National Rescue Party. That party did well in the 2013 election and kind of gave the CPP its thinnest majority in years. But by 2018, a political crackdown, a kind of a cleansing to a certain extent of political opposition, arresting people, basically forcing the political opposition to exile. It allowed the CPP to take complete control of the legislature. Now, that is a very enviable position for Hun Sen politically. But I would say that the threats to Hun Sen's legitimacy, or the Hun family's legitimacy in Cambodia, is a very controversial relationship with its benefactor, which is China. And there are a lot of issues there that are threatening, not destabilizing, but they're threatening. So if you look at some of the cities that are on the border that hold casinos, you have an influx of Chinese migrants who run the casinos, who own the casinos. They're Chinese tourists who come simply to gamble. There are casino effects, which, when you have a casino, this happens in many different countries around the world. When you have a casino, sometimes you get unnecessary consequences by having a casino in your community, which, gives rise to increased household debt, black market debt, illegal gambling, online gambling, unregulated gambling, all sorts of different things, sort of nefarious things happen. And then, of course, you get trans-border or cross-border crime that increases sometimes when you have casinos present. But the Cambodian population has been adversely affected by the influx of Chinese casinos and, to a certain extent, Chinese crime. There are Chinese crime syndicates not only operating in Myanmar, which has been talked about, but also in Cambodia. So where once, for example, people could afford houses within the center of the city, the rising prices, rising real estate prices, a kind of gentrification of Cambodia, has forced the middle class sometimes into the margins of the city. So they can't control prices. And to a certain extent, they're competing with Chinese migrants for some of the things that would ordinarily impact or benefit everyday Cambodians. So the relationship between the state and China is quite good. But there has been, and it kind of comes and goes, a kind of anti-Chinese sentiment. And sometimes there has been calls for a kind of, rebellion, a kind of, hey, don't speak Chinese, don't think Chinese, a kind of anti-China sentiment among parts of the Cambodian population. So it's very important for Hun Sen to manage that relationship, as he has managed relationships with countries who have had a very bad profile among Cambodians. For example, Vietnam. The tensions between Cambodia and Vietnam are quite high, but Hun Sen, throughout his decades in power, has affirmed, really rebuilt ties with the Vietnamese, and a lot of Vietnamese agribusiness, a lot of Vietnamese corporations are doing business in Cambodia. And a lot of people, a lot of activists, a lot of human rights folks are saying that this is coming at the expense of the Cambodian people. So the mismanagement of relationships with Vietnam, with China, are secondary threats to the Hun family's control on Cambodia. But is it a primary thing? Is that something that's driving this conflict? I would probably say no. What I said before was this is Hun Sen essentially taking advantage of the leverage he now has because of Thailand's domestic political weakness.
Thank you. Thank you. So, thanks for mentioning the elephant in the room, and that's China. So my next question is regarding that.
Sure.
So given the fact that Cambodia has a very strong relationship with China, it's buying a lot of weapons from China. And on the other side, Thailand has a very strong relationship with the US. They have a military exercise every year, and they buy a lot of state-of-the-art weaponry from the US. And given that, can we say that this conflict an extension of the great power politics in that region, or at the moment it is just a localized one, or maybe in the future it can go on to that level? This is my first question. And secondly, within this context only, since China is expanding very strongly in the region and it is reaching out to the traditional pro-US countries like Vietnam, and we saw that Vietnam is building strong ties with China. Can we say that it's the waning influence of the US politics in the region that they're trying to prop up conflict? So what do you think about this?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. Let me unpack this. And it's a kind of long, I'm going to try to make a very long story short. Okay. So political realism, as I would tell my students, really has a kind of a bunch of foreign policy options, right? So there's bandwagoning, accommodation, hedging, right, and balancing. Thailand is not in the same place it used to be years ago, where in the 1950s, 1960s, and part of the 1970s, when the fear was of communism, and to a certain extent a communist insurgency coming from Cambodia, which was basically falling apart at that time. So the Thai government under Sarat and all these other early military dictators, they latched on to the United States, and quite smartly. And the Eisenhower administration, Truman administration, they kind of knew that this was a troubled country that they were kind of getting into bed with, so to speak. But it was a mutually beneficial relationship because Thailand became a kind of bastion to a certain extent of democracy, a kind of beachhead in the front against communism. And Thailand gained domestic political legitimacy, economic development, infrastructure, and of course, weapons. And of course, they gained a kind of counterinsurgency program with the help of the CIA and the United States military. But foreign policy always changes, right? Because the Americans wore out their welcome. So China doesn't come into the picture until much later. China's open borders, its trade, doesn't really have a real impact on Thai foreign policy until around the 1980s. And then you start to see a kind of rapprochement between Thailand and China. And this was during the Prem administration, so between 1980 and 1988. And that continued. And the acceleration of economic, political, cultural, social ties between Thailand and China have accelerated from that point on. There was only really one disruption in the relationship between Thailand and China, or maybe Thailand and the United States as well, which was really the 2006 and the 2014 military coup, which deposed Thaksin Shinawatra, and the one that deposed Yingluck Shinawatra as prime minister. The United States act in a kind of like in a normative fashion. It denied Thailand military aid. It paused those military exercises, that kind of the training exercises. It refused to sell certain weapons to Thailand because of those things. And if you're thinking normatively, that sounds like a very, very good thing. But if you're thinking pragmatically, perhaps that pivot, that particular stance where a return to democracy is more important than to a certain extent, a stable relationship with a country that is in a precarious situation relative to a rival regional power in China. So China essentially took advantage, and rightly so, of a breakdown in the relationship between Thailand and the United States. The failed pivot, the normative push, the pressure to return democracy back to Thailand. This was met with economic assistance. It was met with military and security cooperation, and of course, assistance, financial assistance. And I'm not talking about loans, but I'm talking about infrastructure. So there's different railroads or roads being constructed. There was talk about, ports being constructed. The interconnection of Thailand to the broader Belt and Road Initiative that would link, all the way, to the Horn of Africa. But for Thailand, really, it's the port in Myanmar and all the way to the ports in the eastern part of China, at least where they have a kind of regional border or regional ports. So this network, to a certain extent, is very, very important. It's something that is integral to the growth and health of the Thai economy. And that is something that the United States, despite some advances during the Biden administration, this is something that the United States has not been able to, or has been unwilling to do. The United States, to a certain extent, has not acted as an alternative partner to the Chinese. It has not challenged the Chinese influence, the sphere of influence that China's had in the region. There's a great example of this that doesn't come from Thailand. So, for example, there was a comprehensive partnership worked out by the United States and Vietnam under the Biden administration. And there were efforts by consecutive U.S. governments using USAID, which is the U.S. development agency run by the State Department or through the State Department, that were making inroads into restoring not only diplomatic ties with Vietnam, but repairing these old wrongs, the legacy of war, the consequences of the Vietnam War, right? All of these things that were accomplished over the course of decades and that were kind of sealed with this partnership agreement, right, with the United States and Vietnam under Biden, were quickly reversed under Trump because of a trade war, because of the dismantling of USAID, right? And this is something that the United States does not seem to care about a steady, consistent, proactive relationship with Southeast Asian partners. So what is true in Vietnam is also true in Thailand. Threatening Thailand with high tariffs on imports to the United States does nothing but sends questions about Thailand's exploration of different partners, about going the opposite way, choosing different partners, exploring economic alternatives. And that will include India, that would include regional partners like Japan, right? Australia. If you lose that special relationship to a certain extent with the United States, countries have no alternative but to seek alternatives. And one of the major alternatives, obviously, it's not really an alternative, but it's China, right? So this is a very short answer to a very, very long question, right? And Thailand's foreign policy is more and more entangled with the affairs of China. There's a scholar, I believe at Chulalongkorn University, who coined this term, swirling in the Chinese wind. And there's this old Thai proverb essentially that says that Thailand's foreign policy has always been very flexible. It kind of bends with the wind, like bamboo, right? Very flexible. But this scholar is basically saying that, well, look, Thailand's foreign policy is not bending with the wind, but to a certain extent, it's China that is sort of generating the wind, right? And it fluctuates with changes dictated largely by this large power in its backyard, right? And this is something to a certain extent the United States cannot and does not seem to be willing to cope with.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah.
Mark. In fact, you towards the end of your answer, you brought Trump's trade coercive diplomacy and transactionalism in the region. In fact, I was about to ask that question, that whether Trump's coercive diplomacy, threatening and blackmailing with tariffs is going to bring lasting solutions, completely neglecting the historical factors. But you answered that part, and thank you very much for that. So
No problem.
with this, we would like to conclude our today's session, and a very warm thanks to you for enlightening us on this topic. And in fact, it's a great learning for us. And definitely the way you uncovered the multiple layers of this conflict, so its history and the future trajectory, that's absolutely amazing. And we look forward to inviting you more often to our online events and also our offline events. We have our annual foreign policy dialogue. It's a very prestigious international foreign policy dialogue. It's called Maharana Pratap Annual Geopolitics Dialogue. And we do that in partnership with the Ministry of External Affairs India. It's just like the Raisina dialogue. So we look forward
I'm familiar
to
with that. Yeah, of course. Thank you very much.
To inviting you for the dialogue also. And once again, thank you.
You're welcome.
I will send you the link as soon as we approve.
Yeah, I apologize for the break in the lecture when I got cut off. So if you're going to post the link if you're going to post the link to YouTube, maybe you want to cut that part out, because here I am talking and no one's saying anything. So it looks a little strange.
We'll fix that. Well, these are these are the pitfalls of living in a digital era. So we are quite
that's right.
I mean, familiar with that. Having done so many online events, we face these problems occasionally.
That's right.
So once again, thank you very much. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Okay.